Hey everybody, my name is Shannon. I'm with Applied Acoustic Systems, and today we're showing off the brand new Objeq Delay 2 acoustic and filter delay. Let's get into it. Objeq Delay 2 merges classic effect techniques with acoustic resonance in ways no other delays can match. It features dual modulators, including LFOs, dynamic touch and pitch tracking, which render evolving and responsive effects. In Objeq Delay 2, the input signal is first run through this multi-topology stereo delay module with 4 possible internal configurations, 1 tap being the simplest, 2 tap with some stereo separation, and we have a 4 tap option and split. After that, it's run through an acoustic resonator in the Objeq section. And here we can choose between the different types of resonators. And we can even morph between them and modulate that for some interesting timbral variations. After that, it's run through a filter section and then onto an output stage where we can control the input and the wet signals separately, as well as the balance between dry and wet, and then we can bypass here. And then we can always double-click these knobs to reset their default value. So here I have this on a keyboard part. I'm going to bring this in and turn on the delay module. Now, 1 tap is the simplest mode where we have the stereo audio fed into a single delay line. It's run through these delay line filters and then fed back, based on the amount here, into the input. I'm going to turn this down, and we set the time here. We can optionally sync to the musical subdivisions, and we can choose values here with dotted or triplet variations, and even get multiples of these. And I'll leave it at the regular, in this case, dotted eighth value. We can close the panel with that or the X at the top. So this will filter what's being sent back into the feedback loop. But I'll leave it fairly open and dial this down. Now, we can optionally go to a 2 tap, which gives us a width knob, and it places the delayed signal into the stereo field with repeats alternating between left and right, based on how wide we have this set. And in psychoacoustic mode, it uses delays and filters to simulate the arrival times and the filtering characteristics of an idealized head model. But we'll leave it in the traditional stereo panning mode on either side. Now we can run it through an object here. I'll turn this on. And we have here a rectangular membrane, a drum head, a plate, a string, a marimba, or a beam. And you can get anywhere in between these. Now, the frequency sets the root frequency, the first partial of the object. So it's the fundamental, and then it relates to the size of the object. So the lower this is, the bigger the object. So I'll set it somewhere around there. Now, the decay knob sets the quality or the resonance of the object, so it controls how long the partials will take to fade out. So you can get a real nice ringing sound. I'll set it to fade fairly quickly here. Now, the material, when it's dialed all the way left, the decay of the low partials is longer than the higher partials, and as we turn it up, it increases the decay time of the higher frequencies. You get more of a metallic sound. I'll turn this up so you can hear it. I'll set it around there. And then the formants affect the relative amplitude of the different partials. The minimum value takes the object sound to the edge. And this brings it to the center as we dial it up. I'll set it fairly high so we can get a brighter sound. And then the polarity inverts the frequency response. When we have it negative, it'll produce notches instead of peaks. So we can leave it like that. Now we have two modulators here, and we set a source shape. And we have a rectangular, which is an interesting variation, some other interesting sources, and then we have a set destination here. So here we can modulate any of these parameters, but I'm going to set it to the input trim so we can get a kind of tremolo type of effect. I'll put it on, and I have it set to a triangular waveform. And I'll set this to the 8th notes. Now, the pulse width of the knob kind of skews the waveform of the triangle and the sine wave, and we're using rectangular. It kind of controls the shape and how long it's active for. And then the phase is where it's starting from in the waveform, and we click the reset button. And then we can add randomization. And we can modulate either below or above the default values of the source. Kind of an interesting gated choppy effect. And with the middle, we modulate both above and below. And we dial in the amount over there. Here I've got simple short notes on the bass at the beginning of each bar, and I'm going to start with the delay, and we're using the 4-tap topology. We set the initial value over here, and again, I have it set to dotted 8th notes sync to tempo. We can filter it before it's fed back in, but I have no feedback right now. But we can control the spacing of each of the taps with the slider. So here I've got one turned off, and I'll put them all on. I can space them closer together, or farther, a little behind the beat, and I'll double-click to reset it to default. And we can create rhythmic variations by turning selective taps on or off. And I'm going to leave the third one off for now. Now here we can control the pan position of each of the taps. And again, we can alternate between the stereo panning or this quasi-binaural head tracking type of mode. And here I'll turn on an object, and I have this set to the marimba. And we'll leave it in positive mode so that it adds nice tempo variation to the delays. And here we can modulate. In this case, I'm going to modulate the object format, and by using the envelope tracker, I can get some really interesting kind of timing variations of the quality of the delays, which affects the feel of the part. So I'm going to turn this on. And by adjusting the release, I can affect the timing of those delays separately from the spacing of the taps. It's the envelope of them. So I can slowly attack in the release, and again dial it above or below, or modulate it both ways. And then with the filter section, we can choose between 6 dB per octave, 12 dB, or 24 dB per octave, and then filter. The split topology features 2 delay stages in series, each with its own time parameter. The first sets the initial delay of the first echo, and this sets the spacing for all the subsequent repeats. So what I have here is a quick, tight kind of slap at the beginning, followed by a long time-based series of repeats with a multiplier on 8th notes. Or we can do the opposite, where the first one is a longer one with the repeats more tightly spaced. Here I'm going to bring in the string object, but I'm going to modulate that object type using the pitch tracking. So it's sweeping through these, and you can see it's going above or below based on the mounts here. And I have this set up to modulate this first delay time to get this tight delay moving a little bit, nice and slowly, above and below. And finally, some filtering. We can focus on the wet signal. I've got a steep low cut and a high cut with the Q that I can use to emphasize that cutoff point. And then we can blend it in here. Objeq Delay 2 is available now. Head to applied-acoustics.com today for more information. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!